everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Seed Speaks. My name is Ashley Robinson, and I'm the editor of the Alberta Seed Guide. Today, I'll be acting as your host for this episode. On today's episode of Seed Speaks, we're taking a closer look at how policies that aren't specifically ag-focused can affect those working in the agriculture industry. I'd like to thank Michelle Klieger and Phyllis MacCallum for joining us today. And to those watching, please don't hesitate to ask any questions you may have for our panelists in the chat box. And let's start with getting to know our panelists. So, Michelle, can you please tell me about your work and Stratagerm Consulting?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity to join these Seed Speak discussions. I am an agricultural economist and the founder of Stratagerm Consulting. It is an agriculture business consulting firm where I do strategy and other business planning for a diverse group of businesses. And I'm actually really excited to talk about this topic because I think that there's a ton of policy that's related to agriculture, and that's really what I enjoy doing in my work is like bringing these trends to companies so that they understand how it's going to impact their business and what they should be looking for.
Perfect. I love hearing that. And Phyllis, can you please tell me about yourself and your work at the Canadian Agricultural Human Resources Council?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This is my first time with Seed Speaks, so definitely excited about the opportunity. My name is Phyllis MacCallum, and I'm Program Manager of AgriLMI and AgriDiversity at the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council. I'm responsible for primary ag labor market information and all the portfolios that relate to our AgriDiversity files. I've grown up in the ag industry and recently moved over to the labor market. And so we're responsible for providing tools and resources to primary producers to help with their HR and labor needs.
Okay, great. Thanks both of you for being here, and let's get started on the discussion. So my first question is just a general question that either you can hop in and answer. And so when you think of non-ag policies which have impacted ag recently, what is the first one that comes to your mind?
I will jump in. I have a hard time picking one, so I'm going to list the couple that I came up with. And I think that monetary policy, interest rates has a big impact on farm fiscal policy and how governments are spending money and what kind of programs. We've seen a big impact, trade policy, sanctions, and then I'm going to leave it to Phyllis to talk about immigration and other employee-related topics. So it seems to be everything in my book that does directly or indirectly impact agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with Michelle's short list. And, we've seen immigration changes that are definitely impactful. We've had transportation regulation that has changed that's impacting producers across the country. Access to, medication and vet related drugs is also one that we see regularly. And so there are pieces that continuously come back to the ag industry that are heavily impacting the way our producers operate and have significant consequences if not looked at by the ag industry for the effects that it'll have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So why do you think agriculture might not be considered when making up some of these policies? Phyllis, maybe I'll let you go first this time.
Sure. I think it's, these are some large pieces when we talk about policy discussion. And I'm not sure if it's that ag isn't thought of at all in it, but there are a lot of players that have to be considered. And for many that we deal with here is we do have producers around the table, we have industry representatives around the table, but it is about ensuring that everyone does have a voice. And so some of the work that we do is to look at that and understand what the policy implications are. But I think it's also there a lot of the fiscal policy, immigration has a nationwide effect, and so we have to consider how that works for everyone.
Yeah, those are all really good points, especially because there's just so many things to consider that we may feel like we're getting forgotten about, but so-and-so maybe in education feels like they're getting forgotten about too. We have to think about that. Michelle, what would you like to add?
I 100% agree. I don't think it's that agriculture isn't considered. I just think it's that they're not the only consideration, and that policy is often or always a balancing act for the regulators as well as the legislators that are designing it and implementing it. And so that balancing act is the trade-off between different groups and what their needs are. And so each of those things that we talked about, right, on whether it's transportation or interest rates, they impact agriculture, they impact a lot of other people. And so then the question becomes, how does it all fit together? How do you, one, how does it impact everybody? Two, how do you build the coalition to support it? And I think that's one place where agriculture can be part of the conversation more by being part of those coalition discussions. And so oftentimes it's not that agriculture is forgotten, it's that we're not a big enough piece to totally drive the conversation. And sometimes concessions have to be made. And so it's just staying in front of that and being part of the conversation.
Definitely. And I think that really plays good into my next question is, what can those working in agriculture do to make people understand how policies such as the ones that we've discussed can have impacts on ag?
I think just generally getting involved, being involved in organizations and associations that, are building their voice. It takes participation from producers at the ground level to, and grassroots to bring these policy concerns forward, and that coalition idea, whether it's with your association, a couple associations, or a larger group, as we do see with some of these larger policy pieces that are really influential in the sector, is that you come together and talk to those our regulators and government bodies that are at the forefront of this, to showcase why this is going to make such an impact on the industry, whether that's sector specific or industry wide.
Definitely. And Michelle?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, again, as Phyllis said, being part of the conversation through those trade associations, through those industry groups. However, you can be, some larger corporations are involved in the discussion themselves. For individuals, I think that finding news sources or roundups or just sessions like this, where it's a bite-sized amount of information, that gives you the high level of what's going on. I can't not put on my economist, professor hat here, but I would also caution people not to dive too deep. Your time is valuable, and this is one voice. It's part of the conversation. So understanding how policy is going to impact your business is important. I think that giving that perspective to help ensure that the policy is beneficial to you is critical, but you don't actually need to be an expert on all of this. And policy generally moves slow and is really complicated. So I think there's value to being aware. I would be careful how much time you invest, unless this is either your full-time job or it's a hobby you really enjoy. And then that's outside of the scope of your business or professional portfolio.
Those are all really good points. I feel like we can all really get caught up in something and go down rabbit holes really easily. And this is definitely one of those, anything when it comes to politics, I feel like it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole. So I think my next question, I'll ask Michelle at first. So if I'm flipping through the newspaper and I'm just reading the daily news and stuff, what can I keep my eye out for to maybe say like, oh, this policy has been proposed, and what would make me think maybe, oh, this could have an impact on ag?
I think that, again, following those ag sources, news sources or conversation or policy outlooks is a really good place to start. I do think in our everyday lives, it's kind of hard to see the connection or really understand reading between the lines of what's happening. A lot of times I appreciate when there's sort of that line by line account of what is actually being discussed or how it's going to be interpreted. And so for me, it's, is there an opportunity to, first of all, is there that gut reaction of, okay, this company is adopting the sustainability practice, like, is it something I can relate to? Is it not? Is it going to raise my cost of labor? Is it not? Like, that first gut of you understand your business and what you're doing, I think is a really good first step. And then I would then say testing it against what other people are doing. But it's easier than I think most people expect to see that gut reaction of how it's going to impact your business, especially, or your life, especially when the intention wasn't for ag. And so the intention was to do this thing that, is generally very positive or acceptable, but they didn't think about the impact on ag, and to you that will come through much quicker than if it was intended and more nuanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that gut reaction is a very important part, of course. When it comes to anything, I think any way in society, whenever you're reading or watching the news or even just walking down the street, if you see something and it stirs a reaction in you, it is worth taking a second to like look at and think it through. But you don't need to do that for every single piece of policy that you read in the daily newspaper, because otherwise, as you said before, Michelle, our time is valuable. Phyllis, what would you like to add?
I think Michelle gave a perfect example there. Definitely following those ag sources, and I know lots of organizations and media outlets that provide a really good analysis of what if something is being proposed. And so again, it's understanding what that proposition is, what that proposal is, and how that impact is going to come to you. So if the regulation is maybe potentially being set for non-ag, but is going to have an ag impact, our media sources will go through that and explain what that looks like. And then you're saying, okay, this is how this is going to impact me, and how you relate that to the business that you're running. And so, maybe not in so much in the general news, because it is, again, reading between the lines and figuring out, if they're talking about something very general, how am I going to bring that back? But if there are nuances in there that do take an ag twist and will have a significant impact on your business, it's something to definitely consider.
Yeah, definitely. And let's actually look at how some different sectors, their policy around them can affect. So how do policies about things such as technology, sustainability, or immigration impact agriculture? And Phyllis, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those three right now in the ag sector are definitely influential. We're seeing changes in digitalization and technology as we go towards more automation. It's also the skills requirement around that. Our immigration policies are definitely an important piece to consider as well. We have a workforce. Part of our workforce, especially in Canada and for sure in the States, is our temporary foreign worker workforce. And so immigration policy is something that we definitely look at closely, and how we continue to work with organizations to ensure that newcomers to the country are introduced to the ag sector and could potentially become part of our labor force. And so when we start to talk about these policies, we have to ensure that what we're doing make sense for everyone, but also consider what the opportunities are for agriculture and how they will impact them going forward.
Thank you. And Michelle? Oh, you're still on mute.
Thanks. I hate when that happens. So I was going to say that when we talk about technology, there's both benefits and drawbacks. And so I spent last week with a soybean group, and a lot of that focus was traceability. And I can tell you that traceability on a whole both excited the group and terrified the group all at the same time. And so, when there is the new technology coming, right, it's an opportunity to shape the discussion and the landscape and the opportunity. So that is one of those places where I think that being part of the conversation, I actually think in all of these, technology, sustainability, and immigration, that it's important for agriculture as a whole and individuals specifically to join the conversations. So back to the traceability, it is a huge opportunity for value capture. It is a huge opportunity for food safety. It's also a huge risk for not having commodities and aggregated and moving, where are the metrics going to be kept? And the same thing happens in sustainability. I mean, we look at Europe and see that a lot of the sustainability requirements are making it very challenging for producers and for producers to produce food as well as, or commodities, as well as be competitive and stay in business. And so I think that there are places where all of these policies from the outside offer huge opportunities and gain for agriculture. And then I also think that there are places potentially unintended that are drawbacks. And it's not until that last minute when it's about to come into effect that suddenly everybody's like, wait a second, you haven't thought about the food system, you haven't thought about agriculture in this way. And I would say that is, again, really true when we look at trade and climate change goals and sustainability goals and what we can do. And so all of these fields offer huge opportunities, but it does take that nuanced look of somebody on the ground that's going to feel the impacts to explain to the rest of the world what it is on their business and how it's going to change, our systems.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some really good points. Yeah, like I am glad I'm not a politician, because I really would not. There's so many things to think of. I feel like I have enough things to think of already in my daily life that I can't imagine all the different parts that I would have to balance as a politician. And we actually have an audience question that I feel I'm going to throw in here and ask from Beck. And do you think that producers and others in the ag/seed sector are discouraged by outside policies that inadvertently impact them? That's a really good question. Maybe I'll throw it out to Phyllis first.
Just trying to, I think there may be some discouragement, sometimes in the, in the process. It's often, like Michelle was saying, we get almost to the finish line and say, oh, have you thought about ag? Have you thought about how this is going to impact ag? And by that point, a lot of the conversation has happened, and sometimes ag gets missed. And so I think that's where the discouragement lies. And there is a way to resolve some of that. We talk a lot about, and a lot what groups are trying to do now, is, be a little bit more proactive on policy changes, and many are like that. And trying to get that voice in at the forefront to ensure that ag is considered, and that the impacts are, mitigated to the best of their ability. But it definitely does take a ton of coordination to ensure that those who are building policy understand from the onset what the impact is on the ag industry, whether it is, sector or industry wide, and that groups are together to voice that concern, because we are, as much as we feed the world, and we are a vital player in ensuring life for all, we are a small organization or a small industry. And so we do have to sort of kind of get together and ensure that there's a lot of voices that are beating, and saying the same message, to ensure that politicians understand exactly what the needs are and how we feel the change needs to be made to ensure that that the impact on ag is not too great.
Really great answer there, Phyllis. And Michelle, you've had some time to think about your answer. What would you like to say?
I absolutely think that there is discouragement. Building on what Phyllis said, it's such a small amount of the population that is involved in agriculture. In the States, it's less than 2%. And so being multiple generations removed from the farm and farm production, how difficult it can be, the risks, the weather, the technology, the people, all of it gets lost so quickly. And I think that being removed from it is a constant source of challenge for agriculture to not only explain what we do, how we do it, and why we do it the way we do. That there's constantly this feeling of moving goalposts, that we get more sustainable, we get more efficient, we drive prices down, we feed more people, and yet that's not necessarily good enough. We want things to be cheaper, we want food to be fresher, we want production to increase, we want sustainability to be higher, we want inputs to be lower. Like, it's constantly moving, and in a lot of places the sector does step up to those demands, and in some cases the impact is too great and there needs to be a bigger conversation. But I often, am concerned when agriculture and the rest of the policymakers are talking past each other, because there isn't a lot of knowledge. And whether it's on the farm or in the value chain or in the grocery store, it's a complicated system. It is commodities that are constantly deteriorating, and they're absolutely essential to our lives. And so in agriculture, we feel that we're doing this really important thing and that we're misunderstood so often. And I think that really is a huge place of discouragement among everyone.
Yeah, definitely some really good points is that it's communication, and there can be some really hard times when we do get discouraged, as the question had asked. And we have time for one more question. And it's looking at the fact of, what do you guys find politicians typically don't understand when it comes to how policy they're working on might impact ag? And I feel like this gets back to a lot of the points we've been talking about this whole conversation. So Michelle, maybe I'll let you answer this one first.
Yeah. So I don't think that politicians, for the most part, understand ag. Honestly, I'm not convinced that they understand most businesses, and that's not really what their job is, right? A politician's job is to make decisions about policy, and that they're trying to shape their society in different ways. And their job is to get that policy through and impact the lives of the people. And so it's not necessarily their job to understand how a seed business works, or understand how long it takes to breed plants, or understand the labor implications. And so good politicians are good at listening and take the opportunity to hear from their constituents. And I would say that both in the United States and Canada, we are lucky that we get the opportunity to interact with our elected officials and regulators. And that's the opportunity to learn, to teach them about what we do. And that can be in their offices in a political building. It can be on your farm or field or research facility, and sort of giving them the nuance, because I want a politician that understands how to get things done in their job, and then is a good listener, somebody that can hear from industry and understand the implications. And so there are lots of opportunities to engage, to write public questions, to attend industry events, to give tours. And so it's really, I think, upon us to not get too disenfranchised, but take the opportunity to explain how all of these policies that might not feel like they're directly related to ag really do impact our businesses.
Yeah, that's some really good points. We always think like, oh, a politician has to know this and this and this. And it's like, no, they need to listen. Their job really is to listen. So that's a really great mind reset that I think we all need reminded of sometimes. And Phyllis, what would you like to say? I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle made some fantastic points. Our job as producers, when we have the ear of our politicians, is purely education. It's allowing them to understand, where we're coming from, what the personal businesses, what the sector is facing, and if it is on a direct policy discussion, how you feel that impact is going to come to you, and the sector at wide. It really is about taking that opportunity that, we've talked briefly, they don't know about everybody. And so fortunate for us, we do have that opportunity regularly, especially in the ag sector, to meet and greet and teach those who are representing either our counties or our country on what ag is all about and the importance of the sector to the economy. And so that these are pieces that they want to have, close to them, so they have a better understanding of when they start to make policy decisions. They have that piece of information. It's come to them and said, oh yeah, okay, like that's how this will be impactful. So taking those opportunities when you have them, being involved and meeting with local officials and or provincial, national officials, is really important to ensuring that they get that grassroots information about how the work that they're doing is impacting those out on on the ground. So a lot of the work that we do is informing that, building that information in. We try to provide the data behind it to ensure that they have something to go to that you can stand on and you can understand, and so that's really an important piece to ensuring that when policy comes along, that there's background data to back up the reasoning for moving in either direction on policy decisions.
Well, thank you both of you for taking the time to talk with us today. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. I know that I'm coming out of this conversation with a lot of different mind resets and how I think about things when it comes to policy. So thank you both so much for today's discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And for those watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you missed part of today's live stream, don't worry, we'll have it available on demand on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about this subject or ideas for future topics we should tackle, please send a message to Seed World's Facebook page or feel free to reach out to myself. And next week, tune in as we have Rebecca Carmelli-Pelsack having some guests on to chat about the politics of sustainability. Thanks for watching today and have a great day.